The following episode of the Movie Club podcast can and will contain spoilers. Please be aware of this before you listen. Thank you.
See myself in the desert sun. See myself driving with my son. Going out to find his mom. Drop him off and then I'll be gone. Here we are now in the land of Paris, Texas. A very slow burn but full of passion, yes. Ride all night and we ride all day. When I see my ex-wife I wonder what I'll say. I see myself getting very confused. Quite a mess, but I'm quite amused. It's a crazy mashup that works somehow. No one rocks the top like Krista now. Here I am now watching Southland Tales. Richard Kelly's film that's kinda off the rails. Some might hate it and some might laugh. We're gonna talk about it on the Movie Club podcast. Paris, Texas, and Southland Tales.
Okay, welcome everyone to episode number 24 of the Movie Club podcast, an informal book club-like show where a bunch of bloggers from around the web gather together to talk about two films. Today's two films are probably the most disparate films we've had on a single show. Ostensibly, they're linked by an amnesia theme, although neither of them lingers on the amnesia theme. One of them is a lengthy sort of myth-making look at America that is absolutely restrained and low-key, and the other is an implosion of American culture, which is anything but low-key. The first film is Wim Wenders' Paris, Texas. The second film is Richard Kelly's Southland Tales. And joining me, who unfortunately has assumed hosting duties, and so I apologize in advance because neither Sean nor Andrew are with us tonight. But joining me is Jay Teal. How you doing?
Teal.
This is why I don't do this job. I talk and talk and talk, but I don't intro well. Jay Teal from Film Junk. Go.
How's it going, guys?
Great.
I'm Jay Teal here in person.
Also from the Directors Club, Jim Laskowski.
Hello, everybody. I am here. And
also from the Directors Club, Jim's co-host, Patrick Rapole.
Please call me Patrick Turquoise. That's my Christian name.
So good to have you for the first time, Patrick.
Yeah, it's good to be here. It's be fun.
Yeah, we've always been trying to mix up the sort of rotate more with hosts, so it's nice to be bringing in a lot of new folks and mixing it up in the podcast community. So we decided we're going to start with chronological order with Paris, Texas. And it's interesting because I think a long time ago when we used to have a poll on the Movie Club podcast website, there was, I think you put it up, Jay, to be put there. And then when we were looking for a film to pair Southland Tales with on the last show, it might have been right in the middle of the show, Jim mentioned it again. So I assume both of you had seen the film before. Does anyone want to set up the film?
Jim?
Oh, sure. I'm more than happy to set up this film. It's it's something I'd seen, oh man, a long time ago. I'd say like maybe the mid-90s, and it really affected me back then. And upon subsequent viewings, it just keeps getting better and better. Wim Wenders is a very interesting filmmaker. He's made something like Wings of Desire, which is another really transcendent piece of work. But this is written by Sam Shepard, and like Kurt mentioned, it's an incredible portrayal of Americana, and it's basically all about wandering through, this Texas backdrop, and his, Harry Dean Stanton is in this movie, first of all, and it starts with him just wandering around in the desert, and it seems like he's got this aimlessness to him, and he's not sure we're not sure who he is. He seems, he doesn't have any identity whatsoever, and he happens to collapse and winds up in the hospital, and the doctor finds out who he is and contacts his brother, played by Dean Stockwell. And from there, we learn more about, the fact that he's been missing for, I believe, 4 years or something along those lines. And he has a young son, an 8-year-old. So then, they sort of have a reunion, and we see scenes of like home movies that sort of reconnect the two of them, the young son and Harry Dean Stanton's character. But he's also the son has had surrogate parents. Dean Stockwell and his wife have been taking care of his son, and they've grown fond of him as well. So, after he comes to terms with the current situation that he's involved in, Harry Dean Stanton sort of has this revelation that he wants to find the boy's mother, who they haven't had a relationship for quite some time. So from there on, we sort of have a road story, which Wim Wenders is kind of famous for, especially a lot of his earlier films. And, it takes on it's almost like 3 different movies kind of smashed together in a really effortless way, in a very poignant way. And I feel that it might be, long, and certainly it has, a gradual build over time. It's a slow film, but I think it's one of the most haunting movies. Like, when I first saw it, I just couldn't get it out of my mind. And every time I see it, I find more and more to appreciate about it, because I'm growing fonder and fonder of minimalist films with very simple stories that play out, in very simple ways. And yet it has this amazing cinematography. It has, a lot going on, not just with the characters, but I think what it has to say about, identity, male sort of identity, sort of trying to figuring out what his place in the world actually is. There's a lot more to say about it. I feel, if there's a movie that was made for me in terms of like how it's put together, the structure, the cinematography, the amazing score by Ry Cooder, I get more and more enthusiastic about this movie every time I see it, to where it's kind of always lurked in my top 10 favorite movies of all time, but every time I see it, it just keeps getting pushed up more and more. And the Blu-ray especially really, seeing that, in that format really made it special for me upon a recent rewatch. So, I just think it's an incredible film, and I'm eager to hear everybody's thoughts on it.
Jay, you've seen this before, have you not?
Yep. I'm pretty much in the same spot as Jim with this. It's definitely one of my top 10 films of all time. I saw it more recently, within the last few years, but especially with a second viewing, I absolutely love this film. To me, it's a perfect film. The performances are amazing. Like, Harry Dean Stanton is obviously great, but Dean Stockwell in this is amazing. He's just very understated, and just, for people who might recognize him from the more Quantum Leap side of things, he's brilliant in this. And the cinematography is great, the music is great, the story, it's both sort of heartwarming, but really painful to watch as well, it's a very nice mixture.
Yeah.
And yeah, I absolutely love this film. Unfortunately for me, I feel like it's a movie that I don't know that I have a lot to say about it, and that I would want to say a ton about it. Like it seems like one of those films that you just kind of, it's best to just let it be.
Yeah, something like maybe a Terrence Malick movie too, and how it really plays on. It's hard to articulate a feeling that you have while watching this movie, because I think it so focuses on the emotional state of the character, and that's not always something that he can articulate clearly. I mean, towards the end, obviously, we could get more into that about his monologue, but yeah. I think the use of color in this movie is really spectacular as well. I mean, especially after seeing it on the Blu-ray, like I said, I just was blown away, even just when like Dean Stockwell's at a gas station and it has that green hue mixed with the red, sunlight in the background. I just like I want to put every frame of this movie on the wall, in an art museum. I just love it so much.
You should bring some of them to art class.
Yeah, I should. That's a good idea.
So, Patrick, is this your first time with the film, or have you?
Not only was this my first time seeing Paris, Texas, this was actually my first Wim Wenders movie, and I just looked up my first movie written by Sam Shepard that I've ever seen. So
he's written quite a few.
Yeah, I've seen a couple he's acted in, but have not seen any of the ones he's written other than this one. And it's kind of interesting watching it because I guess the way my brain works, I kept trying to put it in boxes. It starts, of course, Harry Dean Stanton wandering through the desert and then sort of stumbling into a gas station. I'm like, oh, okay. Because I knew nothing about the movie before I watched it. So he wandered to a gas station. I'm like, oh, okay, it's going to be sort of a subversion of Western stuff with the stranger coming to town. And then that is quickly dropped. And then it's his brother comes to pick him up. And then suddenly it's like, oh, okay. And he's kind of quiet and weird. And he has the brother has to deal with this road trip. I guess it's sort of a Rain Man thing. And then, of course, they get there quickly. And then that's no longer Harry Dean Stanton's character starts talking more. So he's no longer quite seeming, I guess, so autistic or whatever I thought he was. And I kept trying to put this movie in a box, and it keeps defying it. Eventually, I guess I got all of an hour and 15 minutes in before I sort of realized, I just got to let this movie do its own thing, and it's not going to follow any conventions, and it's the story, and it's going to go wherever the story goes. And I really respected that. I really liked that. Instead of forcing these characters to have moments that would fit, a strict structural plot or storyline or whatever, it's just sort of watching these characters in this weird, awkward situation and struggling to deal with it. So, I mean, it was a really amazing movie and a beautiful movie, and of course, all the acting's great. Well, mostly what I would love to talk to you guys about would be the ending, which I mean we can probably get to, because again, while the movie keeps going where it's going without without you ever really knowing what's going to happen next, where it eventually ended up kind of confused me. I mean, I think the final scenes are like the best acting in a movie that's full of great acting, but unfortunately, I'm not exactly sure what they're in service of. I mean, watching this movie, it was really great until the very end, in which case I was a little, I guess, confused might be the word.
Okay. Well, this is my first time watch of this movie, and I've seen most of Wim Wenders' other filmography. I don't know how this one eluded me for so long, especially considered if you read around, it is widely considered one of the best films made in the 1980s, which admittedly is a weaker decade for film, unless you like the the blockbusters, which tend to, not always be bucketed in these sort of types of, Criterion or whatever type lists. But anyways, and when it finally came out on Criterion a number of years ago, that the cover, the sign on the cover, it is, for me, hands down, bar none, the best cover that Criterion has ever put on a DVD. So there's that. And someone lent me the DVD, and I don't know who lent it to me. So it's kind of a... I went to my coworker who we usually trade Criterions with, and I said, I just finally watched, after having it for half a year, Paris, Texas, and it blew my mind. I'll bring it back in for you. And he's like, I haven't seen that film, and I don't think I own it. So did you lend this to me, Jay? Did you give me your regular DVD after you got Blu-ray? I have no idea where I got this movie.
Nope.
Okay, the
mystery continues.
It just wandered into your life out of nowhere. How interesting!
Perfectly. So, internet, if you lent me Paris, Texas, please let me know.
Well, you have to be able to identify it, because we're not just going to give it to anyone who claims it.
That's right. That's true. You gotta set up the story and jog my memory, because I apparently have some level of memory loss around this movie.
Amnesia, maybe.
Maybe. Harry Dean Stanton's one of my favorite actors, and I think after watching this movie, this is the best performance I've ever seen him give. I mean, he's all over the place. He can do all sorts of different characters, but I've never seen him do anything quite like this guy. And that was...
Have you seen One Magic Christmas?
One Magic Christmas, no.
Well, you got to see that. He plays an angel. It's a Disney movie.
Oh, no way. Well, him and Disney.
A very similar performance.
I don't see him lining up with Disney, but I guess my connection to him was always
Repo Man?
Oddly enough, in Alien.
Oh yeah.
And he's, I think, the first one to go. I never mentioned it at the top of the show, but this will be like spoilers wall to wall, even for movies that aren't in the show. But as this movie progressed, I think I had a very similar experience to Patrick, thinking that I kind of knew what the movie was until it kept going. But I think the Western is at the end of the day, the Western is kind of the apt place to put this movie. It reminds me of something like calling like The History of Violence, the David Cronenberg movie, a Western. It has that sort of digression on what is manhood and all these things, and the way it mulls it over, particularly with family, is what really really struck me.
It's based off of The Searchers, isn't it?
I don't know if it is.
After I watched it, I read the Roger Ebert's great movies review. He mentioned that, but I mean, it does have sort of a. The Searchers is about them, looking for a child, and then when the child gets back, when they bring the child back home, that John Wayne. There's that famous shot where John Wayne isn't quite there. Maybe that was just a connection that Ebert made, and it wasn't something the filmmakers did. But
it is an interesting connection because it's also like a guy that fails to properly assimilate into normal domestic society. I think that's what The Searchers. Well, at least how The Searchers ends, and oddly enough, that's how this movie ends in its own roundabout way. But the one thing I should mention is when Natasha Kinski finally comes into the movie, boy, does the movie ever change tone. It becomes something completely like it's pretty much an all-boys movie, other than Dean Stockwell's wife, for the first part of the movie, and it radically shifted for me, and I. As much as I liked everything else in the movie, the 20-minute or whatever unbroken across the mirror speech that Harry Dean Stanton gives Natasha Kinski, and it's mostly her facial reaction shots, is what sealed the deal that I absolutely fell in love with this movie.
Oh, yeah.
and how it goes about its business. Yeah, so that's my encounter. What do you want to talk about first, guys?
Well, Patrick, what was your issue?
I I wouldn't even call it an issue, because I feel that it's more just me not grasping it. But like, I feel like the ending of the film that's a bad idea of this woman who is some kind of stripper / sex worker, like raising this child who has been taken from the people who he knows as his parents. Like,
sure.
it and I'm not sure, and it did not feel like to me that the movie was asking me to recognize that. Like, I felt like the movie wasn't saying that it was. I feel like the movie played it as if that was a happy ending, or I mean, a bittersweet ending, of course, for Harry Dean Stanton's character, but a happy ending for the mother and reunited mother and son. And I feel like this is one of those movies where you say what happens after the film ends, and it's like one of my favorite jokes is like, if there was ever a real sequel to Grease, it would just be about this loveless, horrible marriage. And like, if there's a sequel to this movie, it would be about this unfit mother and this who barely knows her son, like, and who without really, I don't feel, having a grasp of what is actually going on, has been taken from people who he has considered as parents for most of his life.
Oh, I never took that reunion to be a permanent one when I watched the movie. I looked at it at the point of view of, I mean, ultimately from Harry Dean Stanton's point of view, the movie is his failure to re-engage, or at least his growing ability to re-engage with life, instead of looking at it through, it's all the billboards, which is what his brother does, and then the home movies, and then through the screen of the peep show thing. So it's sort of him finding a way back to actually connect, which he doesn't in the movie. But I think in a surrogate sense, because the mother at early on in the film, the mother-in-law, Dean Stockwell's wife, says that Natasha Kinski's, the biological mother, was sending photos or receiving photos and then didn't want them anymore and sort of cut off contact and just sent money. And I thought that this was Harry Dean Stanton properly connecting mother and son, not in a now they will live together in Houston, but at least a proper connection. And then maybe he'll end up back with Dean Stockwell and his wife in some sort of relationship where the mother is properly involved. Now, I don't think he's going to be involved.
Right.
I think the movie has very interesting things to say about the American family, and that how broken American families can be, and how they can kind of work some positive end, but they can never really be the nuclear family after all the shit goes down. I thought, I don't want to politicize or whatever the movie. I don't think it's that type of movie, but I do think that it chews on these subjects, and I have no idea, because you're just coming out of the whole wave of feminism in the United States when this was made, right? So I imagine there were a lot of women that just sort of took off, and there's a lot of Cassavetes, right, who made a couple of these types of films and cast a lot of these actors, I think.
It does kind of turn into a little bit of a, just with having the confrontational monologues between the two of them, between the glass, that is, very dialogue heavy. It's very Cassavetes, and that they're emotionally coming to terms with their past and who they are, and their broken relationship and everything. But I'm definitely more with you on the ending, Kurt, because I wasn't. I guess you can have a logical objection to the idea of the mother taking care of his of her son now because of where she's at in life, and I was not 100% sure. Why he chose to just say, what, I'm just not going to be a part of this at all. I'm just going to, hit the road and figure out my own shit, I guess, And I mean, I know that's kind of what you come to expect from, something like The Searchers, because that's, he's meant to roam the earth alone, maybe, and he's not meant to be a part of that family unit or not, or, something along those lines. But I wasn't. I optimistically, I guess I would hope that the son would reunite with Dean Stockwell and his wife.
I had gotten the impression that they were going to, because the kid at some point it comes up, how long are they going to be gone? And Harry Dean Stanton says it depends. And then when there was the chance that they were going to miss tracking her down, and he says that they'll have to wait a whole extra month. Just the way he's talking about time, as though they're there to accomplish a task and then go home.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That's what I got from it. But I mean, I don't think with the stuff they're going through in this movie, I don't think anyone's really thinking about what would be best. I think they're more thinking about just resolving their own personal shit. I mean, obviously he feels guilty for splitting everything apart, and
right.
The mother sort of being away from the son as a result of his actions, and it seems like his mission is just to heal that and bring them back together. And I don't think anyone's really thinking about what would be best. Yeah, and that's fine. That's fine with me. It's all in the moment, sort of emotions, just like how they just get up and leave. Yeah. I mean, I don't think anyone watching the movie would think it's a good idea for him to just take the kid and go on this road trip. I mean,
yeah, they all sort of act on impulse.
Well, the movie, I believe, was I don't know how this movie was exactly made, but if you read the little booklet that comes with the Criterion disc, there was a lot of shooting as they went along and feeling it out as they went along. And it's an original screenplay by Sam Shepard, but it's also loosely based on one of his other plays. So there is that sort of sense of in the moment, both within the story, but within the filmmaking. Like, there's no way to predict the end of shots and things in this. It's a very sort of, well, on one hand, it's a totally play it by ear. On the other hand, it is meticulously crafted. Like, the actual photography of this movie is stunningly detailed. It is, I think, it plays as much as you said you wanted to mount every picture on your wall. I think this thing plays as much as a photographic essay of different parts of America, like the LA cityscape, the openness of the Texas desert, and then finally the sort of glass and bricks of Houston. I think that is kind of playing on that as well. But when it's all said and done, it certainly doesn't feel like a movie they just fired out. It does feel incredibly controlled. I don't know how much of it was serendipity and how much of it was storyboarding. I don't know.
Well, I like the fact that his character just essentially to us starts out as a blank slate, and all these different characters and different past transgressions that he's committed. You sort of learn that as time goes on, and I really appreciate that style of filmmaking where you get a sense of mystery from the character. But I think that the fact that he is almost searching for himself, finding a sense of identity of some kind, and I think that's ultimately he tries to find that through some act of redemption. And for him, maybe it's not the right choice, but I think for him, in his mind, the act of redemption is at least reuniting, mother and son for the moment. Whether they're, I don't know if they're meant to be, together for long term or not. But I don't know. I think from the monologue to the very end, I'm kind of a mess. I really respond more and more to the story, just on a pure emotional level. And I think the ending is beautiful. it's almost like he gets a fresh beginning, and I love that he's like bathed in this green light. Not exactly sure what that represents, but other than it just looking beautiful, I don't know. And it also made me think of the ending of Drive a little bit.
Yeah, I never really got from it that even if they did continue to, have this mother-son relationship, I never really got that she would stick with her profession.
Well, one would hope not.
I mean, to me, it felt like she was just doing that, not because she was a bad person. Not that I even think she, not that I think that makes her a bad person to be working that, but it seemed to me that it was just a way to send her son money.
Right. Well, again, it comes back to this hiding behind screens thing. She's just doing nothing to bide her time and just sort of play behind the screen. I mean, she says it at one point to Harry Dean Stanton that like every voice coming across the screen was his voice, as if she's sort of still in this sort of dialogue with herself. Why did I light my husband on fire while he was trying to sleep?
And that's a recurring motif throughout the movie, whether it's the Harry Dean Stanton getting in the back seat of Dean Stockwell's car, or when he walks his kid home, he's walking. They're on opposite sides of the street. Like that was one of the sort of my favorite motifs of the movie. Is even as he's sort of rounding about and getting closer and like making connections and sort of discovering himself through these connections, there's always that distance there. Of course, that the glass divider is the most powerful, where eventually you have to turn off the lights and he has to put the lamp. But like that's that's probably the best image in the last one.
Even better,
totally.
When he does the lamp, they're actually perfectly overlapped in one scene. That is flat out fucking haunting. When they actually merge together in the there's a lot of reflections in the movie too, but that one there is like that. It blew my mind when they overlapped them in exactly that fashion.
Yeah, I think one of the most amazing things about Harry Dean Stanton's performance is, I believe Kurt, you said that you've seen him in a lot of movies and he has a lot of range, but you've never seen him do anything like this. But like, there really aren't many movies where an actor gets to show so much range in a single character. And he has this, and somehow he's able to be all different kinds of, as he's sort of exploring and finding himself, he's able to be all different kinds of people. And whether he's sort of the blank slate at the beginning, as Jim said, or when he's that, one delightful little scene where he's sort of dressing up, wanting to be a rich dad, not a poor dad, a rich dad. And of course, that final scene with him and his wife, Natasha Kinski.
Yeah.
There's so much different elements of that person that we get to see in the single movie, and they all feel like part of the same person, which is, I think, one of Harry Dean Stanton's best choices is like at the beginning, you don't know if, like I said, like if he is mentally disabled or if he's just quiet or if he has post-traumatic stress from something that we haven't seen yet. There's always a bit of a mystery about where he's coming from, but at the same time, he's able to play all those sorts of vague positions without it ever seeming like he's like, oh, he's just acting like different out of nowhere. Like it never comes across as like schizophrenic.
Right.
And I think that's sort of the real marvel, not of the performance in the movie. It's not any one scene, though, of course, again, the final scene is incredible, but just the way that he's able to play all different kinds of scenes in all different kinds of ways.
Yeah, I think one thing that I like about the movie is it brings a lot, like you guys were saying that you were having a hard time sort of narrowing down what type of film this is, and I think that's why I love it so much. It has like the sort of road movie element. It has the fish out of water element. I need to rediscover who I am. And then this whole last act, which is almost a completely different experience altogether, this just more deep emotional experience. I think it just manages to hit so many different tones that it's kind of like I can see maybe people having a problem with the pacing,
right?
But to me, it feels like a crowd pleaser. Like the opening has a lot of comedic beats and it's very light and it feels like you're going on a little bit of an adventure with these two guys, and
feels like Midnight Run, even though Midnight Run came after, like the sequence with the plane and everything.
Or Jonathan Demme's Melvin and Howard, where there's just two guys, pretty much you don't know anything about them in a car riding for 20 minutes. That's a really good movie.
I agree with Jay. Definitely, the other thing that surprised me is I didn't know anything about I didn't know anything about the details in the movie, but I did know, in sort of when it was the way it was described in one line and, online or wherever I would read about it, it would always be like one of the strangest, one of the most idiosyncratic, one of the most unusual movies. So I was expecting something sort of very difficult and more artsy, and no, it really is, because again, it's about these characters and has such a deep root in those characters that it did feel like a crowd pleaser to me too. And that was one of the other things that most surprised me about it.
The scene in the film when they've staked out the bank machine, which oddly enough, great American thing. It's a drive-through series of bank machine lanes, which is just alien to me to look at, but anyway, and the way they stake it out with the walkie-talkies, and that scene plays like it like you say that all this thing is broken up into different movies. That scene plays like this wonderful little quirky comedy, like a Sundance kind of scene, and yet it never cheapens the characters ever. Like, it's amazing how many different tones there are, and there's so many points where it could go to the point where they're just doing this and at the expense of the character, and somehow he pulls it off, and that the character is never. You may not like the guy. I don't think Harry Dean Stanton plays a particularly likable guy for the most part, but I think you're kind of with him. I can't say there's any point in this movie where I'm saying let's go to the next scene. I'm completely enmeshed with whatever is happening right then and now. Although I do have some regrets that Dean Stockwell leaves the movie never to return, because that is the most warm performance I have ever seen him give. He's just an aw shucks kind of guy, and I don't. Yeah, Jay mentioned it earlier when we started. I can't think of any other movie. I've seen him do like heavy duty theater, like the Eugene O'Neill's Long Day's Journey into Night, which he's awesome, and he's like, I don't know, 18 or something.
Well, who can forget him from Blue Velvet?
Blue Velvet, yes, and Dune, and all the stuff that he's done. Actually, Harry Dean Stanton's done a shit ton of David Lynch movies as well. But this was really special. I actually wanted to see more of him and his weird European wife, who I could not put a finger on.
I love the way I love the way she says Hunter. Hunter. I just liked that. I liked her accent.
It does strike me as odd that they gave this guy. I mean, he's a rich Californian businessman, but it's funny that they gave him a very European wife. It's a very unusual choice.
Didn't the production come from Europe?
Well,
it was an American produced film.
Wenders is German, and even though he, for some reason, Germans seem to have an obsession with the American West, and particularly the Indians. If you go to these sorts, if you go to Anne of Green Gables in Canada or the Prince Edward Island, you'll get all Japanese. And if you go way up north into the wilderness where the Indian reserves are, you'll find tons of Germans operating little tour things and whatnot. I don't know why that is. So that seems to be a flavor of when he makes these American movies. He seems to have that vibe. Although this is one of his earlier. I mean, he made quite a few American movies, and Wings of Desire came 3 years after this.
Yeah.
But I don't really know the order off the top of my head. But it's funny that
I know he did a couple of movies with Dennis Hopper, I think. I can't remember what The American Friend. I don't know. Maybe that was something that he did. That was also a road movie that had a lot of the sort of late night cinematography. That's something I really love with this. The cinematography, just like the sun blasted landscapes, or even just the way the camera films in these. I'm pretty sure most of these are found locations, like the hotel rooms they stay in or whatever. Those were kind of just found as they went along too, and I like that element of the movie. The more I learned about it, the more I appreciated it. Just their approach to making the movie.
One of my favorite. I'm not sure if it's a joke or if it's just like an interesting little thing, but like the credits start on what you eventually learn is an eagle eye shot of a mountain. And you see Harry Dean Stanton wandering through the desert, and then as the eagle sort of lands and Harry Dean Stanton looks at him, and then Harry Dean Stanton looks at the landscape, and it's all just amazing and beautiful. All the credits stop, and then he goes on again, and then it introduces the cinematographer's credit, as if like when the leader of a band introduces all of its members, and then it's like, and on drums, and then like the drums start like do 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 like that.
Well, it is a slam dunk in that department. And there's just little scenes, like the scene when Harry D. Stanton steps right into the frame, and he's got that huge, like 4-liter plastic jug, and there's almost nothing left in it. That shot, after the super long, wide open shot, to have it right up in your face, it is kind of showy in that way, I guess.
In a good way.
Kurt, you had mentioned the bank scene. I think that's the only moment in the film that I felt was a little strange, was when the kid, like it fades to black and it fades back up, and the kid he falls asleep on that little lip there, the ledge, and Harry Dean Stanton is sleeping in the truck. It just seems weird to me. Like, it seems like a very kind of go-around device to pass the time or something. Like, I don't know who would fall asleep in a situation like that. Like, they would have to be sitting there for either someone slipped them something, or they've been sitting there for like six hours straight or something.
It's Houston, Texas. It's probably 42 degrees Celsius.
So everyone in Houston just
siestas,
falls asleep everywhere.
Everyone has narcolepsy.
Well, I just think only in the 1980s, like, the society is so much moved on that there'd just be this random kid sleeping on the side of the road and no one would say anything. But I totally believe that. I like the way they gave the kid this sort of space obsession, which I think is really my son's the same age as this kid, and that I think at least in my experience is incredibly accurate with the Star Wars blankets, and he's got I think a Star Trek T-shirt on, and he's constantly talking about space facts and whatever. I really like the kid actor, and I really like the kid character. I can't imagine that's an easy role to pull off.
He's the son of Karen Black, and they were in Invaders from Mars together, 1986 Tobe Hooper remake.
Wait a minute, he's the main kid from the Tobe Hooper remake?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow. That's cool. I had no idea. Yeah, that's a great little movie.
His real name is Hunter.
Yes.
Carson. Yeah.
Oh, you might as well if you're gonna hire kid actors. Although Hunter seems like the right name to fit into this movie. I read somewhere someone was trying to make the comparison of Harry Dean Stanton's character Travis to Taxi Driver's Travis Bickle, but I think that's a total stretch. I think that's just critical wankery myself. But yeah, It's pretty good. And I guess, yeah, I mean, Natasha Kinski is Claude Kinski's daughter. And you can see it when in those scenes when she's just staring at the camera from lengthy time. It's like a John Voight to Angelina Jolie or a Steven to Liv Tyler. Like, wow, I see the resemblance, but I can't believe that a woman this beautiful came from a man that ugly.
I thought her accent was a little off at times too. You can almost hear a German accent coming through every once in a while until she says something that requires a southern drawl that kind of pops up out of nowhere. But it's not a big deal. She's not really talking very much.
And the beauty of it is, I got that. I saw that, but I was under the impression that because she's in these little different like dioramas inside the peep show, that she was kind of in the character of like the woman in the hotel or the woman in the coffee shop or whatever.
I had originally thought that too, but she continues it once they
lapse into serious like connection.
Right. But I mean, overall, that's that and the sleeping on the bank ledge are basically the only two tiny nitpicks I could think of in this film. I think it's a perfect film.
What did you guys think of the color coding of the movie? I think that is incredibly conscious. Like, Jim, you mentioned earlier, there's a few scenes of this really sickly green light. It's really, like, again, very showy cinematography, but that stuff didn't strike me nearly as much as when this movie goes crazy red. Like, for the most part, the two characters, Harry Dean Stanton and Hunter, are both wearing these incredibly bright red T-shirts, and when Harry Dean Stanton goes into the brothel, it like the whole film just goes red for about like while he's going through the corridors, and then the movie again ends on this incredibly like red, like intentionally tinted red scene. And I'm sure, like, I know you guys said it earlier on that you don't want to. The joy of this movie is not talking it to death and just letting it wash over you, but I have no doubts that someone sort of thought about this movie in terms of color, and it does use it very, very effectively, and it's showy about it, but I still think it totally works.
Well, I mean, like you said, I think it's very deliberately shot, but it's never showy to the point of distraction. In any way, it's not something like, of all the adjectives I would use to describe this movie, stylish probably wouldn't be near the top, despite the fact that it's beautiful. And again, I think just the costume of Harry Dean Stanton. The first thing you see, your eyes immediately drawn to that red baseball cap, which is, it's not only just like the only color in his clothes, but it's also just so out of place and strange. I definitely noticed the color was deliberate, but I never made definite connections or theories on what any of it meant.
Well, you do get caught up, and I agree, and I think it's the right way. You get caught up in the movie emotionally. Like, the sign of a good movie is when you kind of stop, like, looking at it analytically, and you're just swept away with it.
Right.
And I think that happens. But I will say this.
And I think the Hunter's obsession with space is another thing where you can, you make connections between the vastness of space and the distances. I never thought
about that. You're right.
It's another one of those things that's never overwhelming or distracting, but it does add texture and flavor to the movie.
Well, and again, Dean Stockwell's company is putting up billboard signs, and there's something about when you drive on the American interstates, which they end up doing in order to get from where he picks them up back home. There's something about America on those interstates that causes restaurants and things to build those signs like into the stratosphere. It's like a competition of how high they can get the signs, and then of course the the imagery on that, and it's almost like another screen, which is another distancing effect, which you kind of get. It is a pretty freaking smart movie if you think about it that way. Yeah, the last thing I have to say is there's no actor on this planet that can rock a trucker hat quite like Harry Dean Stanton. Is there any final thoughts or anything else that anyone wants to say about Paris, Texas?
I just wanted to point out the scene where he's walking with Hunter, and they're on either side of the street, and Hunter is mimicking his actions on the opposite side of the street as a really fun scene. And I'm not sure if it's something that has been done elsewhere. I'm sure maybe it has, but there's a Spike Jonze short film that I would imagine is playing off of that scene in Paris, Texas. I think it's called How They Get There or something, where a guy and a girl are mimicking each other on either side of the street, and the guy eventually walks into traffic and a car flies 50 feet into the air. And I just thought that's another example of like in the middle of what you would expect to be a sort of deep and dense and maybe sort of depressing film, there's a lot of playfulness in it. And I think it's because Harry Dean Stanton's character is just a seemingly another big kid. Like they're constantly, him and Hunter are basically on the same wavelength. Like when Hunter wants to go find his mom with him and he asks when they're going to leave, and Harry Dean Stanton says now, which is a very irresponsible kid-like response. And they're eating McDonald's when he says it, and then they immediately go buy walkie-talkies. And I think that's what I liked, is it's just his relationship with the kid and how well they get along and how he kind of comes down to that kid's level.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a major step on Harry Dean Stanton's climb back up to some level of adulthood. I'm not saying that he ever sort of achieves the fully responsible adult, but what you get from the narrative that like he was infatuated with her, and then he was super pissed off at her. And you get the sense that this is some interesting way of trying to relate to, late 20th century maleness in the United States. And I don't know if you could ever call Harry Dean Stanton an everyman, but they kind of try to go there with that, at least maybe a Southwestern everyman, like a country song kind of everyman. I mean, the movie does play like a country song writ large.
Yeah, with Ry Cooder's score, I guess it's more of like a blues Americana roots feel to it, with the very sparse slide guitar kind of stuff. I think he's got a rendition of Blind Willie Johnson's "Dark Was the Night, Cold Was the Ground," and I think that I don't know.
Warm was the bed that was on fire.
Yeah, I don't know. This movie has grown over time with me. Is like Jay said, it's damn near perfect. Yeah, I was thinking more about the colors too. I just off the top of my head, I don't know if red is supposed to signify passion and fury and love that he's desperately trying to hold on to, and then like the greens might be sort of like his feeling of being cold and alienated in some way. That I kind of like. I like it, especially when you watch something like Punch Drunk Love. I kind of like having that hyper awareness of, when characters decide to, possess symbolism in the form of color. I kind of enjoy trying to pick that stuff out sometimes. Sometimes I read too much into it, like Purple with Breaking Bad. But, there is something incredibly encapsulating about Americana and the search for identity within this movie, and I think Harry Dean Stanton's performance is one for the ages. I really can't say enough good things about everything, especially his performance. It's one of those. If people were to tell me what movies, like if people want sort of the American experience, but also want something a little bit challenging, but also audience pleasing, I would point them to this movie. I really would. And someone like my mother, she responds to this movie, and she's not.
That was my first thought. Is, you know what? I bet you my mother would really like this.
Yeah,
movie.
for sure.
Oh man, let's all just have a little moment of silence for the intense agony that is trying to pick out movies that you think your mother would like.
Hey, my mom likes Boogie Nights. You just never know. Yeah.
My mom went through a period where she watched Zodiac it had to be about 15 times within like half a year.
So
wow.
That's basically doing that. That movie's not short. That's doing that back to back to back, right?
Yeah.
Well, I sat down and watched Bad Taste with my mother. It's Peter Jackson's Bad Taste. So,
wow.
Teach their own.
Last movie I showed my mom was Fish Called Wanda. She was not having it.
That's fucking classic, though.
I know.
Something's seriously wrong with your mother, sir.
With her taste in movies, at the very least.
Yeah.
Okay, any final thoughts on Paris, Texas, or shall we move along to the other half of the show?
I give it a 5 out of 5.
I'll give it a 5 out of 5 as well.
Are we rating it?
I don't know.
Yeah, we did last show, so I don't know. But I think it was. I don't know what our rating system was for the last show. I think it was out of 5.
I give this. I agree as well. I give this movie a perfect score. I can't see how you could hate this movie. It's just too damn good.
Yeah, I'll probably give it a 5 out of 5, or maybe a 4.5 out of 5.
Cool.
In between those, maybe. I don't know.
Okay.
I have to go to the bathroom.
Yeah, we can do it. So we're at the intermission portion of the show, and we're going to try this meet and greet thing. I'm going to start with you, Jim, because you're welcome back, by the way.
Yay, thanks. Happy to be back.
Glad for you to return. You're coming from the Directors Club, and both Jay and I have done episodes on there. So we've all, the little podcasting community, have all crisscrossed back and forth. What was the most recent episode of the Directors Club?
One of the more painful ones for me, Tyler Perry.
Oh, it's so good.
It is. It's great to listen to. Absolutely. Our guest brought up some
preparing for it was painful.
That's the perfect segue over to Patrick, because this. I've been on the Directors Club. We've not brought you into the Cinecast. We certainly will at some point. Yeah. But I always interact with Patrick's fist shaking to the heavens on Facebook with some of the movies. I'm like, oh, they're at the Tyler Perry episode, because he's just talking about one after the other. And there is a certain art to angry ranting on Facebook and engaging other people. You have a whole, you have a little fan club, because every time you drop a bomb, there's 50 comments, and everyone is coming in. That's you don't see that too often. And Facebook people tend to, kind of do it half-assed, whereas you've almost got this little,
that would be me,
gather around the campfire kind of thing going.
Well, most of the people I know who end up commenting, I know from the message boards on Chud, and the message boards got redesigned, and then the whole thing happened where they're basically really hard to navigate and really hard to be on and all that.
Isn't that the entire Chud website from moment one?
Yeah, no, absolutely. But but we're already friends on Facebook, and we sort of realized that these are better than message boards because we're already on them. So it was sort of a pre-built community that just got shifted to the Facebook. Also, I have to say, I'll get 50 comments, but usually what will happen is I'll say, hey, guys, remember that Fifth Element is really crazy? And then it's 49 comments of people quoting the Fifth Element. So I don't want to say the new Cinema de Cahiers is on my Facebook.
There is a weird cult following around that movie, which one part of my brain understands that, but another part of my brain completely does not get why people are so passionate.
I am
about
completely with you on that one, Kurt. I understand both sides.
It's the best heavy metal movie that ever got made. Is how I feel.
The live action one for sure.
Yeah. No, actually, the guest we had on for Tyler Perry, Evan, do you remember how to pronounce his last name? Seth?
Was it just Satoff?
Seth, probably.
Yeah.
He does a series of articles on Badass Digest as Sam Strange, and his where it's this character he does where he's a director who directed every movie in Hollywood, and it's him sort of remembering how the movies went, and they're always remembered wrong. It's very, very funny. But anyway, his article for Fifth Element kind of sums up what makes that movie so amazing. So if you want to check that out, that'll probably clear up some things, or not. Probably not, actually. But
And Jay, how are you doing back there?
Just in general?
In general.
I'm doing pretty good in general. Just got the cat on my lap.
Aw.
And enjoying a nice evening.
What'd you have for dinner?
Grilled cheese.
Good.
Which was good.
Great.
With or without ketchup?
With ketchup.
Okay.
Actually, I was watching Chopped, and it was the episode where it's all cafeteria lunch ladies. And the one woman made the most ingenious dessert. It was a dessert grilled cheese with sweetened cream cheese instead of cheddar.
That's amazing.
Which I thought sounded quite good.
Yeah.
And still fried.
Yes, of course. Other than that, just working.
How's the trailer editing going?
It's almost done. It's about 98% done. After this, I have to go back into it and rejig some of the audio, and it'll be all good.
And when is that gonna go public?
That's gonna go public on Monday. Woo. And it's not really like an official trailer. I don't know when this will be up, so I don't know if I can say what it's for, but you'll find out Monday what it's for. It's kind of just an early look at the next documentary, which is about time travel. It's called How to Build a Time Machine. And we've shot some stuff so far, and it's been coming along really well.
Yeah. So, I wanted to give a teaser for the trailer, Ridley Scott Prometheus style.
Yeah.
Right in the middle of, you're going to have to find the Easter egg in Film Junk to get to the Movie Club podcast and find the middle section and find that, and that will point you to the link on the particular website where this trailer will be.
Is there anything sadder than an ignored alternate reality game? like what if they set up the marketing for the Dark Knight and all that, but no one did it?
Yeah, like if they went and did all that for that, what was that, Darkness Falls or whatever, that one that sort of completely failed right around Christmas time. Yeah, no one was going and tracking down websites for that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's tackle this son of a bitch. Southland Tales. Not exactly the best reception when it first debuted at Cannes. Booed. But that's not... Actually, I usually find movies that are booed at Cannes I like, but this movie was unfinished. It was really booed. It was actually picked up by Sony, and then it took another year or more to re-edit the living crap out of it and add in a lot of new voiceover, special effects. Everything that can go wrong with a huge epic science fiction film, like Blade Runner style or whatever, went wrong with Southland Tales, except this movie never played in Canada theatrically. I don't know if anyone here is, when we go around the table, we'll ask if anyone's seen it in the cinema, but no one saw this movie, and it just kind of disappeared. And those that did kind of come around on it generally hated it. And it just seems to be, after all the sort of Cinderella story aspect with Richard Kelly's first movie, Donnie Darko, it just was kind of sad and whatever that this one just completely died. when I saw it the first time, I certainly didn't love it, but I liked it. I liked it quite a bit. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me set the movie up. This movie's impossible to give a synopsis for.
Yeah.
It could take like 20 minutes and give a synopsis. But
I did not envy Jim's job of having to sum up the sort of wandering story of Paris, Texas, but I definitely I envy you even less.
Yeah.
Well, Southland Tales, to me, the best way to describe Southland Tales is if someone merged Fox News, The Big Lebowski, and Mulholland Drive into one movie and cast it entirely with Saturday Night Live and cult actors. And basically, the movie is set in a Los Angeles beach community in the middle of the 2008 presidential elections. The movie was made in 2005, so it was a near future. But in this near future, the Middle East has nuclear bombed Texas, and that has driven the Americans to be at war with about 5 or 6 countries in the Middle East. And that has caused all of the oil to stop flowing into the United States. So a German inventor is working for the U.S. to make a new, like, Nikola Tesla form of ethereal energy that they call liquid karma. And somehow, in the middle of all of this, The Rock, playing essentially a fictionalized version of Arnold Schwarzenegger, lands with amnesia and ends up in the middle of his amnesia bout researching a role for a film written by a porn star, and in connection with the Republican Party and a Marxist terrorist group that has a number of schemes in play to destroy the Republican Party and break down the Super Patriot Act that they have set up. It all culminates on this massive green energy-powered mega Zeppelin and some possibly a rift in the universe that has something to do with Sean William Scott. And despite The Rock and Sean William Scott being the main characters, this is not a sequel to The Rundown. That's the best I can do with this movie.
Great job.
What did I'll start with Jay. Was this your first time watching it, or had you seen it before?
I had seen it before, and my experience this time around went like this. Like, I don't absolutely hate this movie, but I put it on. First 10 minutes, I'm thinking, maybe this little bit of time I've given it has really been worthwhile, because it seems like this could be a lot of fun. Then about an hour into it, my mind starts to drift, at least throughout the first hour. At the hour mark, I'm like ready to just start, dusting while the movie's on or something, or do something while it's on. And then at the 2-hour mark, I'm, finishing up some work while it's on the TV in the background. And at the 2.5-hour mark, I am completely detached from it and happy that it's over.
Yeah.
That's it.
Oh, I'm next,
That's it.
correct?
Yeah, go for it, Jim.
Okay, well, I'm kind of I don't know. It's so weird. My first experience was after I heard all the reviews. I didn't see it in the theater. I pretty much just rented it, having been kind of a fan of Donnie Darko. It's one of those movies that the more I watch it, the less I like it. But at the same time, I think I'm a fan of this guy because he's kind of nuts, and I kind of admire his audacity in tackling a lot of weird, crazy ideas. And I'm not saying he's a great filmmaker. I just think he's an interesting filmmaker with really good ideas, but not quite there yet with the storytelling process. He's a filmmaker that kind of goes up his own ass, and that's sometimes okay with me if I'm enjoying, everything else going on. With that said, this movie is a complete mess, but I find it entertaining and not in an ironic way, not like something with The Room or whatever. I get a thrill out of seeing even just some of these character actors who don't normally have, these kinds of crazy showy roles. They're there in the forefront. I thought the casting was kind of weird and ingenious. Not to say that the acting is particularly good. I don't think Justin Timberlake is he's kind of terrible in this movie, to be honest. And I'm not a fan of the voiceover. The Book of Revelation stuff is really annoying to me. I know that he's trying to do like a Cliff's Notes version of his prequel graphic novel trilogy that's supposed to accompany this movie, with like the beginning and most of the voiceover narration throughout the movie. I don't think any of that stuff works, but as sort of like this crazy mashup puzzle of a movie that I don't know what his deal is, because even as I was watching the box, that is a very simple premise, which was told, as a Twilight Zone episode at one point. It's based on a story by Richard Matheson that is nothing like Richard Kelly's adaptation of it. I think he just tends to go for broke, and whether it completely works or not, that's definitely not the case with his work, with all of his movies. I think his ideas are there, but he hasn't really, fit them into a cohesive narrative that, works in terms of a story that congeals in any way. But I don't know. I do kind of see the Mulholland Drive connection. I am a fan of David Lynch, and I see that his influence is kind of here. I even thought of Paul Thomas Anderson's Magnolia. But I don't know. I kind of enjoy this movie as a train wreck, but I also don't, consider it to be terrible in just at least the ideas that I like. And maybe it's because he's kind of coming at it at as a fan of like Philip K. Dick or whatever. And, I just see it as a romp in some ways. I mean, it definitely goes from like, the music video moment with Justin Timberlake in an arcade that's called Fire.
Is that an Arcade Fire? Is that?
Yeah, but and towards the end it becomes all melancholy as he's like, that's the thing about Kelly. His tone is just completely inconsistent. And normally that kind of stuff bugs me, but I don't know. Maybe I'm an apologist for this guy, but I kind of love this movie in some strange way that, it's just an exercise in excess that, borders on pretentious. I will admit that, but
borders.
Still Patrick.
Yes, please continue, Patrick.
Okay. Well, of the Box Office Mojo reported $275,000 this estimated about $20 million movie made in the theater, I was one of those. I was one of those tickets, and I dragged my friend along because I heard about its sort of disastrous Cannes screening, and I kept just hearing about how crazy it was, and it just seemed like the kind of thing that you want to catch in a theater. And of course, I had no idea what hit me after I saw it, and not necessarily in that good way where I'm thinking where it's just like, wow, I can't even process how great that movie was. It's more in that way, like, I can't even process how you thought, like, to make this, like, to take. But okay, but I subsequent viewings, I've really warmed up to this, and I really have. I guess because it kind of is as silly as or weird as it may sound. It's kind of a personal movie for me because I think this is sort of the ultimate college stoner movie, more so than a lot of typical stoner movies. Because, like, to me, being a film student who smoked pot with a lot of other film students, like, this is like every stupid half-baked conversation that was had. Especially, I went to school in 2007, so I was right, in all the terror, when George W. Bush is still in office, and yeah, the war on terror is bullshit. Like when like all of the sort of the ideas that this movie's preoccupied with were still very big and, you know, right there in the culture. And it is, and like even its touchstones, you know, it quotes the most famous line from the most famous T.S. Eliot poem, and it's like really surface level references to Karl Marx and they're, you know, the sort of thing where, you know, Revelation, where people get obsessed with sort of the symbolism inside of Revelation without ever considering what it actually means, you know, and like all of its touchstones are very much like freshman to junior in college who smokes a lot of weed. And I mean, the fact that a large part of it takes place in Venice Beach, which is sort of where all of those, you know, burnouts who, you know, that's sort of where they all flock, I think is telling. And I think sort of the way he casts it by the 90s, like pretty much anyone who's in the SNL in the 90s, I think that's telling. And like, I think he has having fun time with it. And it's sort of like the closest a film has ever gotten to a Thomas Pynchon novel. Like I actually just read The Crying of Lot 49, which is a very similar movie that's ostensibly like a conspiracy thriller, but is actually super postmodern and meta and referencing itself and goes on weird digressions where it'll have like pop songs, like the complete lyrics of fictional pop songs playing, you know, and you'll be reading scenes from plays that characters have written. And in that way, it's something that's very familiar to me in tone and style, and something that I'm, you know, very fond of, despite the fact that, you know, it could have done all those things and, you know, have made sense.
Yeah.
You know, every time I watch this, including the most recent time, every time I watch it, I go, all right, I've seen this enough now. I've probably seen it 4 or 5 times by now. I go, I've seen it enough now. I know the basic sort of events. Having foreknowledge of all of these things, I'll be able to get it this time. Never once have I ever been able to follow it all the way through. And even there was a Salon article that you sent me, Kurt, where it not only does it in great detail describe every event in the movie, it sort of answers a lot of questions about references and why things happen and stuff. Even like reading that, I was still like getting lost. And I mean, and I don't think that Richard Kelly is taking it so seriously as he maybe he took Donnie Darko.
Yeah.
Like I really don't think we're meant to. I think that part of the fun of it is just how it's just so fragmented and sort of bludgeoning you with these kinds of references. And obviously that's, you know, not going to be for everybody, but I think it's an extremely enjoyable experience with a lot of legitimately funny moments, a lot of unintentionally funny moments, and just it is one of those movies like sort of The Fifth Element where you can just keep mentioning every tiny weird thing, and eventually you realize that the entire movie is made of things that make no sense. And I enjoy that a lot. So I really do like this movie, but I will never, you know, defend it as satire. I won't ever defend it as, you know, as well constructed, or I didn't ever defend it as having well-rounded or interesting characters that you care about. But as sort of the film personification of, you know, smoking pot in dorm rooms, I think it's pretty great.
Well, this is sadly or awesomely my 6th time watching this movie. I never got a chance to see it theatrically. I actually tried to have the Toronto Underground Cinema in Toronto bring up a theatrical print just so I could defend that movie on stage to an audience, because while I didn't quote very much, I liked it a lot the first time I watched it. Of course, I didn't understand the plot the first time I watched it. But with each subsequent viewing, it has massively grown on me. And while I don't completely disagree with Jay's criticism that it makes you want to do chores around your house and just get little errands done, because the movie is distancing and cold and needlessly overly complex, but I happen to like these sorts of crazy Vonnegut-esque satires of America, and I think that Southland Tales is a great satire of America at that exact moment. I mean, he does predict that Hillary Clinton would be on the Democratic card. He doesn't really even go there. He just mentions it in passing. But other than that, I love the idea that this movie is constructed as a channel hopping experience. It does have a cohesive plot. You will see that the all the characters and the double crosses, they all kind of do make sense. But it's told in such a way that you get the sense that someone is channel hopping. And I mean way more on steroids than RoboCop or Starship Troopers, which also goes for that kind of feel, where they will insert commercials and music videos and everything into the mix to give you the flavor of that world. But as an act of world building, I really think that Southland Tales gets this strange America where a war would be sponsored by Budweiser and Hustler magazine, or that. And I love the idea that the green energy source that America is finally forced to adopt after it's cut off the teat of foreign oil ends up bringing about the end of the world. I think that's wacky and delightfully satirical. I will defend this movie as satire. I'm a big fan of Domino, which is also written by Richard Kelly, and it does this even more. I mean, Tony Scott, who directed Domino, is obviously much more of a visual stylist. I mean, Kelly knows his way around a long tracking shot, which he has a big one in Southland Tales, which we can talk about later. But Tony Scott knows spastic over-editing, and that is what Southland Tales and Domino, for that matter, feel like they're written. Like you're just jumping around like crazy. It feels like maybe the proper home for this would be a HBO miniseries, but I think that if you tried to stretch it out into a long character developing thing, it would wreck it. I think the fact that all of the characters are broad TV talking head types is what makes the film. That's what makes it for me.
I would definitely agree with that, but at the same time, I would say the fact that everything is so broad and you don't have time to develop depth in anything is the reason I wouldn't defend it as satire. Like all of it, there's not necessarily things I quote unquote disagree with. It's just it feels very broad and it never feels as biting as say Idiocracy or it's which is it's just as satire. I just feel it's not as strong as it is just a sort of cultural throw everything in a blender kind of a thing. It's
funny if you go back to Donnie Darko, the satire in Donnie Darko, like the Patrick Swayze character, the Smurf stuff, the Married with Children stuff, that is actually more biting. Like the attack on the 80s, or the sort of mulling of the 80s, I think is more biting.
Yeah.
But it's more biting, and the reason why I quite love Donnie Darko, and the reason why Donnie Darko is a far more engaging film than Southland Tales is because there's so many human characters in Donnie Darko, and the emphasis on moments in Donnie Darko are on human moments, whereas the emphasis in Southland Tales are on like wacky, like crossfire news bullets and this kind of thing, which is, I mean, the world is clearly fictional when you're watching it because it's pretty over the top and crazy, but at the same point, that's what he wants to highlight, and I think he does a very good job of it.
I think in Donnie Darko, like those human moments sort of get lost, though, and his kind of need to like have a mythology behind things or just especially with his director's cut.
Oh, which is horrible.
Yeah.
I much prefer the original version where it's, again, it's less focus on the time travel and more focus on like his family and what he's going through.
Yeah. I mean, he pushes his ideas right at the forefront at times, but they happen to be things I kind of like. You mentioned Vonnegut, and I'm a big fan of Philip K. Dick. So, I mean, it's just maybe he just needs he needs to be his own editor and his own, and obviously he's kind of his own worst enemy in that he tries too much. And I think as kind of a mashup, Southland Tales works really well. I mean, but as a cohesive movie that like its messages are clear, or even what happens in the story is clear, that's just not there. And even in something like The Box, which could have been a very simple premise with a very terrifying conclusion, sort of gets all muddled too, because he can't resist throwing in wormholes and water things, or like portals. I mean,
that's his thing.
Yeah.
They're in all of them.
Yeah,
I think
he gets too indulgent at times, but I think it works better in Southland Tales.
But here's the kind of amazing thing about Richard Kelly is Southland Tales on IMDb. It's at estimated budget. It's like $17 million. So let's say it's like a $20 million movie. This movie is like Kurt mentioned, has pretty astounding world building for such a small budget. And that's what's sort of fascinating about this film is not that, oh, he's some megalomaniac who was obsessed with his own ideas and just went up his own ass. He figured out a way to make a movie for very cheap, that is this huge and epic and strange. And maybe he came upon the possible worst way to lower the budget of your movie, which is to cut it in half and then release half as a series of graphic novels. I think in the history of budget cutting.
Has anyone actually read the graphic novels?
No.
I don't. I think in fact you could pose that question to the world and you'll get the same response. I don't think
it's even on the Blu-ray, and I was kind of stoked to get the Blu-ray because it has his commentary on it, and he takes the movie way too seriously.
Oh, does he?
Yeah.
I never got that impression watching it.
I know. That's
neither
what I
do
mean.
I.
I know. It's just strange for him to just this is meant to be, an indictment on this, or, he was way too, preachy with his commentary.
Maybe it's the same thing, because, Donnie Darko, sort of the same thing happened. He was, he made a very interesting movie, and then when you see the director's cut, he's interested in all the wrong things. Maybe he, once again, misunderstood his own movie.
Well, I tend to disagree with that to an extent, because if he was only focused on the time travel aspects in Donnie Darko or whatever, why would he have that lovely scene with Drew Barrymore losing her job and just flipping out? And or my favorite scene in all of Donnie Darko is Holm Osborne, who here plays Robert Frost, the Republican presidential nominee. The line in Donnie Darko where he goes, "The airline better not fuck us on the shingle match." I think that's just my favorite line in the whole movie, and it's just a wonderfully little domestic detail. So, he does have a knack. He does have a knack for putting that stuff in there. I don't know if there's a ton of it in Southland, but in Donnie Darko there is.
But I feel like the director's cut overwhelms a lot of that with more of the rules of the time, which again, if this is the movie I wanted to make, well, the movie you wanted to make is less interesting than the movie you ended up making. And I feel maybe...
it's one of the rare instances of studio interference improving the movie. And Southland Tales may be the case as well. From what I've heard of the Cannes cut, which was 20 minutes longer, the voiceover is pure sarcasm. They re-recorded the whole voiceover to make it more neutral, instead of a very I don't know, the goofy guy in Zardoz overly narrating it. This is kind of the 21st century Zardoz, if we're being perfectly honest. I love Zardoz too. So
I will agree with Jay though that I can't imagine, and but though I am still surprised that the director's cut, even on the Blu-ray, never showed up. But I can't imagine this movie being an additional 15, 20 minutes. This movie, I really like this movie a lot. It is punishingly long.
Agreed.
Yeah, I don't disagree there, but oddly enough, it actually, Jay was saying, by the last 20 minutes, he's just glad it's over. I think the movie wonderfully, as a miasma of images, it wonderfully comes together in the last 20 minutes with with the Repo Man ice cream truck and the Mega Zeppelin and that just absolutely fascinating three-way dance between Sarah Michelle Gellar, The Rock, and Mandy Moore. Like, there are combinations of pop culture that are just insanely hurtled together, like this meta text within the movie that's fantastic. And the Rebecca Del Rio, which to me is the absolute key to Mulholland Drive. Like, I mean, she's not quite the Silencio Cub, but that is a fucking awesome rendition of the national anthem on July 4th at the climax of your movie. I fucking love that. Like, the last 20 minutes for me is wonderful.
Yeah, as soon as the blimp hits, then the movie really does pick up, gets its second wind, and I really do like the last 20 or so minutes. But yeah, but getting to there, especially once The Rock sort of takes off, and is he? I can't even remember the exact events. Is he? And he's found by the Republican Party, and then he sees Mandy Moore again, and then.
Well, the weird thing is that you have two conspiracies going on within the Marxist underground, and then you've got 2 or 3 things going on with the Republicans, and they all do this fancy weaving together. It is more or less seamless. The monkey in the wrench that really convolutes everything is the one woman that works in the U.S. Aden, not Miranda Richardson, who's pretty great in this, although underused. The woman who's always eating the Cheetos, like she's watching TV. Everyone eats in this movie like they're watching TV, by the way. But when she gets a copy of the movie script that Sarah Michelle Gellar's porn star has written, and she starts to act it out to Boxer over the phone, that's the one like non-rational element in the story. Everything else is surprisingly rational, but then she starts acting it out, and of course, the screenplay does mirror the plot of the movie, and this is her way of weaving the screenplay within the movie and the screenplay of the movie together. And it culminates with, I think, her demanding, after she's given all the exposition that The Rock needs, that he stop what he's doing and let her give him a blowjob in the middle of Venice Beach. Fortunately, the narrator then shoots her after that. Like, it's almost Godardian. It's like, Godard for dummies. This movie.
Yeah, good call.
I think it is. I think emphasis on the for dummies part, but
I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to say that. Richard Kelly is an unheralded genius, but he is the type of experimental avant-garde pop filmmaker that America has earned in 2006. Like,
I know.
That's what I kind of love about the movie.
I get some sort of perverse thrill out of his stuff. I don't know.
I'm not being condescending. I legitimately enjoy almost every scene in this movie, but I must admit that unlike the constant change of pace in Paris, Texas, you just are into it. In this movie, you kind of you alternate in and out. It's like listening to an album at some times where you almost don't even know this song exists, and you kind of blank out while you're listening to it, and then like maybe a year later you'll be listening to the album and you're like, that is the best song on the album. How did I not hear that before? That's kind of the experience that I get when when I'm watching this movie. But I think like The Big Lebowski, like Mulholland Drive, like a lot of these like Wes Anderson movies, more watches, you let the movie wash over you. Once you can just let it do its thing and you're not fighting against it, the movie actually does work on its own level of engagement. Exactly what you said, Patrick, about The Fifth Element, where you just stop worrying about the movie and you just let its absurdities penetrate you. that's when it really, really does work.
Yeah. No, okay. What is it? Okay, a couple questions about the plot, maybe see if anyone understands it. What's over the loudspeaker as the blimp is exploding? And there's like a big announcement, like is that first time I saw it? I thought that was God on the loudspeaker. Like, who is on the loudspeaker? who's like, oh, and by the way, no one rocks the cock like Krista Sindikier.
Yeah,
Cindy Pizzinski or whatever.
No, Krista now.
Krista now.
There's like 2 or 3 lines, like again, like the Big Lebowski, that other characters repeat when they may not necessarily have heard the line. This is a Coen Brothers thing, I guess, that he's stealing. I don't know. I think that's literally the movie announcing it's over. I don't think that particular announcer is like textually in the movie, but it's not Justin Timberlake.
I think Jay may have gone to dust his things.
I think the announcer is just a joke.
Yeah, it's like the Dick Clark July 4th celebration, right?
Yeah.
A lot of stuff in this movie is just failed jokes that because of what surrounds it will then be analyzed, and people will try to figure out what it actually was when it was a failed joke. I mean, is it not fair to say that this is I've seen it him mention that this is supposed to be a black comedy?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would definitely describe this as.
Sure.
The biggest flaw for me is that the majority of it is just not funny.
I think Justin Timberlake's musical number is one of the funniest things.
I absolutely hate that sequence. It reminds me of just he's so insincere doing it. Like you can almost see he reminds me of like just someone doing air bands or something. Like I can't explain the insincerity behind that performance.
He's Dieter from Saturday Night Live.
No, I think that's
he's attempting to be detached while doing it and failing miserably to the point where it looks like Justin Timberlake attempting to look emotionally detached. Like the whole thing with the beer and spilling the beer, and that is the worst. I absolutely that sequence. A lot of people ask why that sequence is in the movie. I mean, it's basically
that sequence. Everything else fits in place, but that sticks out like a sore thumb.
Seriously, people say like, what the hell? Like, why that there and whatever? But it is. He does get high. Like he injects himself with the drug, and that's his drug trip. And
it's bad. I mean, it's just I don't know.
It's just absurd.
It's absurdly bad. I mean. I think that wouldn't get the question of why is that in the movie if the movie wasn't 2.5 hours long. When a movie runs as long as this movie runs, it is open to people saying, why is that in your movie?
Yeah, you could start mentally editing it.
Exactly. If he had kind of kept it to a manageable and reasonable length, I don't think there would be as much ammo to be hurled towards this thing as there is, because every single scene now is under scrutiny by people who are sitting there and wondering when it's going to end. And I don't absolutely hate the movie. Like I actually agree. I think that, I actually, it reminds me of, the opposite. Mr. Nobody kind of reminded me of this, but this at least is just more out there and more goofy.
Right.
But I think that it just, I don't like the look of it. Like the visuals are just so all over the place. The aesthetic to me is just,
flat TV look.
I don't like his aesthetic. Like his graphics, how they're really overcomplicated, and they remind me of like late 90s, early 2000s, sort of like, the all over design shirts with dragons on it and stuff, or some sort of like cyber design, or he over designs like he overwrites and over everything else.
Yeah.
And you could really see that in the Donnie Darko director's cut.
Oh yeah.
With these weird like video game looking sequences, but I also think that the casting, it's just one of those things where, like, I understand why he's casting the people he's casting, and in a way, I kind of like it. But in another way, I think, well, just cast people who are right for the role. You know, like, do we really have to cast these people, like, what's her name, Sherry O'Terry, and everyone to draw some sort of like meta connection to this? It doesn't need it. Like, we can draw that connection already without the gimmick casting. And I think the gimmick casting hurts the film. Where, like, there are some people that are fine. I think Sean Scott Williams, is that what his name is?
Sean William Scott, yeah.
Right. I think he's good in it. I think The Rock is good whenever he's not trying to be funny. The Rock is horrible at comedy.
Really, you don't like his no, not the finger thing. I love the finger thing, but you don't like the like, I'm a pimp and pimps don't commit suicide. Wink, like that kind of thing. That doesn't strike your fancy. I think he has the delivery for that.
Mm-hmm.
He has charisma. He has charisma, and sometimes that can deliver comedy, but he doesn't have comedic timing. I have the same problem often with Will Smith and his movies, where like he'll just deliver all the jokes wrong, but he's so charming that he sort of gets away with it.
The Rock is not a comedian. The Rock is being put into comedic roles, and it's being it would be like taking someone who's not a wrestler and making them, you know, perform as a wrestler and seeing right through it. Like, you can see right through The Rock's comedic chops.
David Arquette won the WCW World Championship that way. So there you go. That's true, by the way. He was actually the world champion for a little bit.
But I don't know. I just, my main issue with this is the length. Like I said, the first 10 minutes, I was like kind of into it, and the music is really good. Like, the score by Moby is really good, but then I slowly started to remember why this movie didn't work for me, and then when you're not even halfway through it, and already it's just like, okay, I remember now. What? And then, you know, obviously for this, I had to stick with it. And I agree, once the blimp comes into play, it does pick up a little bit, but it's just a mishmash, and it's over ambitious in my opinion. I think it while you guys are saying it's a you know, for a $20 million budget, it does these amazing things. I still think it's over ambitious, and I think it is hurt by that. And I can only imagine what the 160-minute version is like. I mean, you see Janine Garofalo pop up out of nowhere in the middle of this, and it's like, okay, well, I guess she was left on the cutting room floor at some point.
I do wonder if Eli Roth had any lines, or if he was just there to get shot on the toilet.
I believe he was just there to get shot on the toilet.
There's a lot of, see, this is where I think that either it's the most literal image ever, which I wouldn't put it past Richard Kelly. There's a lot of toilets in this movie. There's like a big toilet in the middle of the Marxist thing, and then these like scenes like Eli Roth shot on the toilet or whatever. And you wonder, is that like a gag? Like, is that a failed joke, or is that like a metaphor that the country's going to the toilet? I don't know.
It doesn't matter. It can be. It will be whatever the person watching it sees it as. Yeah. But that's the one thing that I don't totally understand. I know, I can see that this is satire. I don't understand why it's good satire.
I don't think it is, personally.
Well, it just is.
It ain't like what's the gas humping Citizen Ruth satire that is really like pointed and targeted and slays everything it sets its sight on. It's not that kind of satire, but it's more the
unfocused, weak.
It's like Idiocracy. It's exactly like Idiocracy. All the criticisms that you lump on Idiocracy, you could lump on this. If you make a movie about a horribly retarded culture, which is what both Idiocracy and Southland Tales are about, it's going to be hard to watch, because like the very nature of that movie is going to make it hard to watch. So yeah, I fully admit that doing something like that is shooting yourself in the foot, because it's designed to be offensive in that way. But I think that he's successful at navigating this particular world, and I think he does hit the right, for the most part, he does hit the right tone. Like I like his, like, look at how absurd this culture is kind of tone. It's Doctor Strangelove in that way.
I don't think, I totally disagree with that.
Yeah.
I mean, Doctor Strangelove is on a whole other plane than this. Like this to me is just, all it's doing is it is satire. Like, and that's it. It's not good satire. It just,
but you don't find Doctor Strangelove to be like incredibly broad at times, like just jaw-droppingly broad.
No,
Yes.
it's the satire in Doctor Strangelove isn't broad.
It's the
I think
comedy.
the broad comedy, which is used to undercut the seriousness. Yeah.
The performances are broad in Doctor Strangelove.
Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, to me, this is the same as, I know, Kurt, when you were at least initially talking about Midnight in Paris, which I haven't seen yet, about it being like a Cole's Notes sort of journey through all of these characters and history, and how it kind of offended you that you were being talked down to, or that everyone around you in the audience felt so good about themselves because they picked up on all of this stuff.
Exactly.
That's what I get from this, that it's just all of these obvious satirical beats that will please a lot of people in the theater that are looking for a way to have some sort of figure out some sort of puzzle within this movie or something.
See, I completely disagree with that. Completely disagree, because when I look at Woody Allen, at where Woody Allen is in his career to do this movie, I find it pandering and insulting. When I look at someone like Richard Kelly, who's very, very young, he's basically shell-shocking a young audience with a lot of very broad cultural references, and some of them are pop culture and some of them are higher art or whatever, but the idea is not to say, look at how smart I am, or the idea to say, you will be pleased because you got these references. I believe that the audience that he's making Southland Tales for, it's almost like a, here's a smorgasbord of little samples, and if you strike to follow one of those samples, maybe someone will read some T.S. Eliot after watching. That's where I look at the difference between the Woody Allen kind of thing. It's within the context of their careers. I would
agree that I don't think that this movie is self-congratulatory. I feel it doesn't. I mean, again, maybe. I mean, I sort of support the death of the author reading, where it doesn't matter what Richard Kelly says. But, maybe he thought he was being very pointed, and he thought he was being, but it feels too silly to me to be that. I will say, I agree that the comparison as far as very broad, easy references. But then I'll also go ahead and say that I think Sleeper has more biting satire than Southland Tales, if you want to talk about where they are in their careers. Sure,
but and Sleeper is far more at the, Woody Allen at the closer to the beginning of his career.
Wouldn't a satire that's buried within something that's a little more palatable and accessible, that in itself be more of a success than satire that's buried into a film that's impenetrable and turns people away from it?
And makes less than $500,000 at the box office.
Well, put it this way, no one went into business to get rich off satire. You go through the history of cinema, and at the bottom of the box office pile will be the entire satire genre. People don't get it.
With an exception of Starship Troopers.
That movie didn't make any money.
Did it? I thought it was pretty big.
And a lot of these satires do get reevaluated. I'm not suggesting that the world is ready to give the full reevaluation treatment of Southland Tales.
Oh shit!
But
Starship Troopers barely made half of its budget back. Oh wow!
Absolutely, and it was a big expensive movie at the time. But I mean, people come around to those kinds of movies in the end. I'm not suggesting that that's going to happen in this case, but I do think that he wanted to make a movie that was America Now, and I don't think A Smart Satire is oddly enough, the right movie. Like, I do like his 200 cable channels. There's literally a scene in the movie when The Rock is watching television and he's on like channel 1086 and he's flicking up 1087, 1088. And again, the way everyone eats food in this movie, they eat it like they have a bowl of like junk food in front of them and they're just consuming it. And yeah, you could certainly make the argument, well, then what value is that to watch? But I would even make the argument that that's not clever. I mean, the channel flipping thing, like, that's really something that's clever?
That's a Conan O'Brien bit.
No,
that's on par with like Rocky 14 in like a future.
Stay tuned.
No, I thought you were actually going to go to the Mr. Brainwash in the Mr. Brainwash movie in the middle of Exit Through the Gift Shop. But the thing is with Southland Tales is that he may give the feel of a channel flipping movie, but it does actually. It isn't like Kentucky Fried Movie or something like where it's just sketch after sketch after sketch. It is actually a fully connected plot that he's telling in this built universe, and I give him credit for pulling it off. Now he may not pull it off that you can grab it all at first viewing, but I think there is a
fifth or sixth viewing. Like, I really do think part of a director's job is allowing those pieces to be connected, and I would say that the fact that you can't connect them unless even when you're reading this along,
he failed on that note for sure.
Yeah,
let's go back. The movie that this movie references the most is Kiss Me Deadly.
Yeah.
Like the car is that The Rock drives the same car at one point when he leaves the Frost Mansion. He gets into the car from Kiss Me Deadly. It's playing at least 2, maybe 3 or 4 times over the course of the movie, and of course both of them have this nuclear angle to them. And I believe that Kiss Me Deadly was an abject failure in its day and age because there was no ability to rewatch the movie. Mm-hmm. And I know that when you make a movie in 2006, you're making it in mind that it will have an endless life on DVD, and people will like Donnie Darko. I mean, Donnie Darko, people watched. It didn't have a huge audience, but the audience it had watched the shit out of that movie. And I think that Southland Tales was constructed in that sense. I mean, It was constructed to be this kind of overwhelming puzzle, and it's not. You don't put this puzzle together to say, look at how smart I am. I put this puzzle together. You put the puzzle together like anyone puts a puzzle together, for the enjoyment of handling the pieces and putting them together. And that's why I like this movie.
That's the problem, though. There's no enjoyment in this. Like,
I get some enjoyment out of it. I don't know. I mean, I get the Kiss Me Deadly, homage quite a bit. I mean, like at the time, that movie was sort of seen as like an allegory for the Cold War and the paranoia and all that kind of stuff. And here he's sort of channeling, the Patriot Act and terrorism and all the things that we were dealing with at the time. He's not making a successful satire, in my opinion. I mean, it has satiric elements and the pop culture references and stuff, but I just think it's kind of deliberately surreal and too silly to sort of be taking seriously. I can't imagine like people having a desire to actively parse this movie, and I think that's why. No. I don't think the joy is connecting the puzzle and saying what the puzzle means. It's actually handling the individual pieces. And like a puzzle, to overly stretch this analogy, you watch a little bit, you come back to it. The movie can, and I don't think it's an insult to the movie to watch it while you are doing your house cleaning. It's exactly designed to be like that. It is a movie you put on in the background.
It's the first movie that I'm aware of that may or may not have intentionally be designed to take place inside of an environment of distractions rather than the typical movie theater, which you hope, not these days in the multiplex, but you hope you can watch the movie with a complete focus. This movie actually works when you're focused on maybe a few other things.
it seems to me that a lot of the evidence that's being brought up here is in favor of the movie, outside of beyond the just find it entertaining because of a personal connection, or it's goofy or whatever. It seems a lot of it is just so shallow. Like the Kiss Me Deadly thing. What about that is interesting other than there's an opportunity for some cinephiles in the audience to go, oh, Kiss Me Deadly's playing on the background in the TV there. I don't understand how that is evidence of this being in any, like, intelligent in any way.
Well, again, it's intelligent in the way that that this is a movie that's constructed around the aesthetic of channel hopping, and now you're dropping in.
But how is that intelligent?
Well,
the concept of a media-driven society and channel hopping and the internet, and like, this is all stuff that's pretty basic stuff.
No, but I'm not going to say that it's world-alteringly brilliant, but I do like the idea that it's one thing if it was just all crass, like, reality TV stuff. If it was just like Jerry Springer and Survivor and all this. But I do like the fact that he's saying that all of these pieces, these random pieces in the channel hop, you've got stuff like you can bounce Kiss Me Deadly up against End of Days, which I mean is The Rock's character's name, is Arnold Schwarzenegger from that awful Satanist movie, and I like the idea that it's just it's a collection of just random cultural fragments that no one seems to be able to latch onto anymore. I'm not saying it's new or original or earth-shaking, but I do believe it's wonderfully realized within the nature of this movie. Now, whether or not that movie will put you off or not is another thing, but I think it's in a way designed to put you off in a weird way.
Which can be annoying for some people. Like, that's kind of why I don't like the Tim and Eric movie. I feel like that movie is kind of designed to piss people off. And I just don't find that funny, whereas I find this very funny. But I don't know, I appreciate mashups. I mean, I think there's some talent that goes into creating a mashup. But it's borrowing elements, and it's not completely original.
And to what end? To what end? Like, I
understand. Jay's saying, the idea behind mashups, you want to maybe recontextualize things.
Sure.
When Quentin Tarantino takes the theme song to Across 110th Street and puts it in Jackie Brown, he's commenting on Jackie Brown and he's commenting on 110th Street. When Richard Kelly puts Kiss Me Deadly in this movie, he's not really commenting on it.
Right.
So no,
it's
I
just
definitely
throwing
agree
it
there.
in a blender and
I think the pleasure. Yeah, I think the pleasure of the movie is just its form, and if you can't get pleasure from that, you can't. And I wouldn't blame anyone, but I just think sort of the sort of loose way that the things are put together without meaning, and that is the enjoyment of the movie. The actual details of the satire could have been any number of things that really do feel just as broad as something you'd see on, Conan, because Conan O'Brien has this thing where he'll go and he'll look at a different channel and he'll invent channels, and the whole thing is mocking how many channels cable has, like, these are all very broad things you could see on SNL, which is, again, why he cast all those people. I don't think the actual content of the satire is as important as sort of the form and the way he just sort of spreads them all out. And I think that it is well achieved in playing with the form, but I don't think it achieves it. It's well achieved as far as adding up to something.
Right.
You're a smart man, Patrick.
Yeah.
That was well said. That was very well said.
So, I mean, I would never, again, I'd never blame anyone for not liking this movie, because the pleasures I find in it are all just in form, not necessarily in content,
Yeah.
It's funny, and you can separate the word form from the word craft, because it's kind of ugly.
Yes.
As a movie, but as an exercise of form, it tends to work. And usually those two are somewhat indistinguishable, but in here they're actually fully separated.
Even the box was pretty ugly looking, I thought. I mean, that sort of cloudiness, that fog over the lens kind of look. I didn't really care for that either.
The DVD, like with the ribbons of different like star faces.
He means the movie, The Box.
Yeah,
not the DVD box.
Yeah, the movie, The Box.
We could talk about that and be talking about two different things,
and
and
I
still
do
having
think,
a conversation.
Again, like all comedies, which I do sincerely believe this is, if you think that they are failed jokes, that there's no way that reevaluating the movie
explaining
is really
the
going to do
joke
it for
to
you.
not resurrect the joke.
So this isn't a movie. There are some movies you don't get it at first. Yeah, maybe check it out again. Like there's no way I'd say, hey Jay, maybe you should try it again. Because a huge part of the enjoyment of this movie, the thing that gets you through the fact that you have no characters that you really care about, that there are no storylines that are arced in traditional, ways that are easy to follow. Like what gets you through it is that, I mean, at least
you find it funny.
should say what gets me through it is I do find it legitimately funny. I think when Amy Poehler and I forget who the other guy is, when they're pretending
hilarious.
to be arguing, he's like, his dick was 500 inches. Like, there's a lot of this movie I do legitimately find very funny.
Same.
So, and the silliness of it, I do find funny. But if you can't find it funny, then it's just that's never gonna be for you.
And Jay, you find Tim and Eric's $1 billion movie funny, correct? And I just don't at all. So, maybe it just comes down to that subjective, taste.
If Tim and Eric's $1 billion movie was 2.5 hours long, that might change it.
Yeah, it is. It does. If Southland Tales didn't really have some knockout final images and really come together at the end, I don't even think I would be defending it. It's a classic case of it's a struggle to get through that middle. There's definitely parts in it, although there's lots of little Easter eggs along the way, little fun things to chew on or whatever. But I think the ending is so strong in the movie visually that when I come out, I'm like, yeah, I'm glad I took the journey or whatever.
Also, I think the music helps a lot, and that's actually something I always thought about with Donnie Darko. Because when I got the score and I just listened to the score, I'm like, I sort of realized, you could put the score on anything and it would make it very meaningful. And
I think that's actually a big point that score helps this movie along quite a bit in making it seem like it's saying a lot. Well, I think the score is better than this film.
Okay, for example, when Sean William Scott and Sean William Scott are on a floating ice cream truck and they're going, friendly fire, I forgive you. Like, that is ridiculous, and I have no emotional attachment to it, and there's nothing in this movie has grounded me to make that a meaningful or cathartic moment. But because of the music playing, I always somehow get a little moved by it. And it literally is just the power of Moby's music.
That's the power of Moby.
Which in Southland Tales is okay, but in Steven Spielberg's War Horse, people would flip their lids.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and guess that War Horse has more defenders than Southland Tales.
Probably.
Yeah, but no,
I definitely fall into that Jay stereotype in that I won't even see War Horse. I know which camp I'm in on this, and I'm unashamedly in my camp, and I can't even bring myself, as much as I love Spielberg, to bring myself to watch something like War Horse. Because I don't believe there's I don't know, I would rather something be bleakly ironic than treacly sentimentality, which is the reason why I would like something like Southland Tales and don't like something like Good Will Hunting or Dead Poets Society, or those movies can never work for me. But something like this, I tend to like overblown absurdity, and this is that. That being said, I don't like the box at all. I just
I was
the box
indifferent. I was
doesn't do
indifferent
it for
to
me.
I
I never did see that one. Do either of you know, or any of you know, I guess, if he's doing anything next? If he has another,
He's got something in the works. It might be a horror movie. I'm not sure, but he's working with Eli Roth on something called Corpus Christi that might come out this year or the year after. Not exactly sure on the details, but
Yeah, there's nothing on the IMDb after
he
the box.
seems like the kind of director who might accidentally stumble. I mean, you know, Kurt, you really like Donnie Darko, and I've read defenses of it that make me sort of understand people who really like it, despite me not really liking it myself. But like, I feel like, you know, it's any moment it feels very possible he'll stumble upon the right combination of inspiration and casting or whatever, and he'll accidentally make a really good movie.
Well, I believe it's not that I know any of the process or whatever that goes into these movies, but I believe if he had an exceptionally talented film editor, and I don't mean just someone making the snips and tightening the movie, I mean someone that he goes out and shoots his however many 1,000 feet or megabytes or whatever worth of film, and then comes back and here's the screenplay, here's all the dailies, edit this into something coherent, and then he walks away. I think that the movie would actually, because that's kind of what made Donnie Darko good, was the fact that he was forced to chop things down right down to the bone and not be overly indulgent and let the mystery work, because there's literally parts of the movie missing, rather than over-explaining everything and making it more distancing for the audience. I mean, the thing that fails the box for me is that the box there's no mystery to the box. It's an incredibly obvious story that you could do in a 30-minute Twilight Zone episode.
yeah, it totally works.
And then he decides to overly complicate it.
Yep.
Like I think Donnie Darko and Southland Tales are by their very nature overly complicated. They're not simple stories at their heart. They're really complicated, like plotting. And in the box, it's like, what would you do? You can sum up the box in a sentence, and then he just tries to overly like muddy the waters just to blow it up into a 90-minute feature. That's what didn't work for me. Whereas Southland Tales is gonzo from the get-go. Like there's no, you know.
I just pictured Richard Kelly as James L. Brooks in Modern Romance, and like he needs to find his editors like Albert Brooks and Bruno Kirby or something, you know, like, because I could just picture Richard Kelly being like, no, those footsteps need to be bigger, or we got to, you know, make this part obvious or whatever, and we can't cut that out. No, we got to leave that in there because that explains this thing, and you know.
And then you want someone at the other side of the table who's super practical. It's like, this works, I get it, everything else is gone. Moving on to the next scene.
Well, if his next thing, Eli Roth is working as a creative producer, that might help.
I hope so.
I mean, I think Eli Roth is pretty good at stripping things down to the essentials.
Yeah, and not overly complicating. Like, none of his films are particularly convoluted. They're pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
I'm sure my mom will see Corpus Christi because that's where she was born. So I can convince her to see a Richard Kelly movie. So
where is Corpus Christi?
It's in Texas. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's by the...
To bring it all full circle.
By Paris?
It's by the Gulf of Mexico?
It's right by Paris. No, it's very close to the bottom, like by McAllen. It's not too far from the border. So if you want to go sneak some weed, that's the way to go.
So, do we have anything final to say about Southland Tales? You want to give it a rating, or does this movie defy rating?
I want to finally say that the probably the biggest misstep for me, as even though you can sort of see where he's going, but what it detracts from the film, like way outweighs anything it might add to it in meta content, is casting Kevin Smith as like a fucking wizard. It's literally like the dumbest thing.
They did that in Live Free or Die Hard, didn't they? They cast him as
they did the exact same thing in Die Hard 4. Yeah.
No, they cast him as I mean, they didn't fucking cast him as a wizard. Like he looks he looks like Gandalf in this, except he looks like Kevin Smith tried to look like Gandalf. And
well, actually,
I like the cutaways to his face nodding. Though.
Supposed to be modeled after Karl Marx. That was the template for that. And he's in the like Jenny von Westphalian room or whatever, which is like Karl Marx's wife. You know what I mean? Like it's all very like overdone. Overdone is the word. And it's funny because Kelly loves to indulge himself in these like exposition bombs. It's like, we've gotten far enough. We're not going to work any harder. We're just going to have someone come in and explain it. And why not have Kevin Smith, who does the exact same thing in Clerks and Chasing Amy? So
see,
why not?
That right there to me is a sign of a complete lack of self-control or discipline. The fact that he casts Kevin Smith in a role where he's wearing a ton of makeup, and it doesn't even have to be Kevin Smith, but he's just doing it because he's friends with them and because he wants some sort of meta connection, and it's completely against any sort of, positive end result in the film. Like, why would you not cast an actor in that role?
Well, because it's like bleakly ironic. Like, is this
how
exposition?
Is it?
Well, okay.
I think he's being
this
ironic.
Exposition of a character that has to come in and say, "Oh, there was a time rift, and we sent monkeys through, and then we decided to send an actor through, and here's the body of the actor." Like, none of this matters to anything, and so it's like that because it doesn't matter.
I think that it's sort of. I think he was sort of taking the piss when he cast like Curtis Armstrong and Wallace Shawn and Zelda, like all of these super familiar people, but super familiar.
Everybody's
familiar
familiar.
to like a small
Everybody
set of
is.
people.
No, super familiar to people who just like even they don't know them by name, but they know that they saw them in a comedy from the 80s.
Exactly.
And I think that's
a director who uses casting to for that purpose to take the piss out of something or to wink or whatever. To me, that seems just irresponsible.
I absolutely agree.
Within the body of this film, fine, because the whole film is kind of a joke.
Yeah.
But in general, as a director, it seems to me like it's a really sort of shallow, irresponsible move to treat your casting with such
I'm not hiring you as an actor. I'm hiring you as an image. Like that's insulting.
As an inside joke.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I do think he's like commenting on distracting casting and all that, but I mean, it's just again, I think the bad far outweighs the good, and I don't. And so, I mean, I agree with you 100%, Jay, that it's not a sign of a good director. I'm just saying,
right?
It's funny, like to think that he's commenting on what did you just say? Commenting on strange casting or whatever.
Yeah.
It makes me think, like, what is he not commenting on in this movie? Like every single choice he makes in this movie is a comment on something.
Yeah, is it a bad
totally
choice
true.
or is he being clever?
Are his bad choices a comment on?
If you listen to his commentary, that's exactly what it is. It's just like over commenting on everything.
Has anyone ever read Nick Hornby's How to Be Good?
Not that one. No.
The one character in that book is writing this novel on shit he hates, like just stuff that annoys the hell out of him. And it turns into this 1,500-page manuscript that he can't even go back and edit down because he hates the book on the things that he hates because it's so like long. And that's kind of Richard Kelly's Southland Tales, in that he's piled up all of these things and he's like, holy shit, this is 3 hours long. What the hell do I do now? Well, just leave most of it. He spent a year re-editing it. I don't know how. Like, Sony gave him a couple $1 million after they spent I don't know how much on it at Cannes, and I mean it was acknowledged that it was in rough form then, but they spent a lot of money to fix it up, and then they obviously realized after it was, and I'm air quoting, fixed up, that it was unreleasable, unmarketable, and whatever, so they didn't really do anything with it. But I if you're gonna make a big gigantic mess of a movie, I can appreciate it on that level, and I will take this type of movie over a boring, stuck to formula, whatever. I guess I defend Southland Tales because it's not as offensive as I feel people make it out to be.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't know.
Man, this is the way the way the episode ends. Not with a bang, but with a whimper.
Like I said, I don't totally hate the movie. Like I can I'm on board with some of the stuff you guys are saying, but it just seems like it's like a offensive misuse of resources or something. It just like. I wonder if he was in the editing room and trying to save his movie, if he regretted at all casting his entire film with jokes. Like, maybe at that point he might have been like, you know what? Maybe I should have actually took casting seriously and not used it as a wink to my audience. Then I wouldn't have to, struggle so hard to save this thing in the editing room. It just feels to me like it's. I'm not entirely sure. It's not as clear with this movie what the end goal was as something like Freddy Got Fingered or even the Tim and Eric movie. Like, this movie feels like...
Well, because those movies were written by comedians, and this one wasn't.
Right, but this movie is still trying to do comedy, and if it fails, it fails. I mean, The Rock is a wrestler, and he's trying to act. I mean, I guess that's appropriate, but... I just don't understand what the goal with this film is, other than to indulge himself and do whatever he wants and see what he can do. Like it feels like you're talking about like comparisons here. It's like he's Rain Man and he needs Tom Cruise to come in and say, "We're going to take all of your abilities and use it in Vegas to win us a shitload of money." Like he needs the Tom Cruise to come in and sort of.
Man. Can I ask you a question? How many megalomaniac directors have ever actually met that Tom Cruise person who does that for them? Like I mean, M. Night Shyamalan drove himself into the ground. Like, like there's not, it's not even like Richard Kelly has had a big success, but other than I guess sort of the strong cult following of Donnie Darko.
Well, Donnie Darko actually did transcend its own cult following. It sold a ton of DVDs. Like it whoever owns that movie made a
right, but I mean
really large profit on that movie.
But he doesn't have a Sixth Sense, he doesn't have a Signs. He doesn't have some kind of he's not George Lucas. He doesn't have a Star Wars, But like I can't think what are some I guess.
But $20 million in the scheme of things, $20 million isn't in the movie world. It's not a ton of money. So he hasn't. It's not like anyone's given him, $80 million and said, go hog wild with that. I highly doubt anyone will. His three films, by their very design, are not designed to appeal to a wide audience.
That's for sure. Especially
Donnie Darko was a bit of a fluke.
The box got the worst cinema score
ever. Was an absolute though. It was a conceptually, marketing wise, the box is a no-brainer. He just turned it into an audience unfriendly version of that particular story.
Gave it the real Richard Kelly spit shine there.
Yeah. To me, within this type of filmmaking, like he feels like the Kevin Smith of this like pseudo intellectual sort of complex filmmaking. Like I put something like Primer up against this or up against Donnie Darko, and there's no comparison there. It feels to me more like he's using the complexity of his thought process and his form and everything to obscure his faults. And that complexity in itself is like the Hail Mary I don't totally respect.
Yeah, I can agree with that to some extent. I feel like he's definitely maybe have read like a Cliff's Notes version of like Michio Kaku's, physics books or whatever. Like he's read this like a quick introduction and sort of applied those elements into his movies, and it's not.
No, it's that scene in the Coen Brothers, A Serious Man, where Michael Stuhlbarg is grading the Asian physics student, and the Asian student says, "I understand the analogies," and Stuhlbarg is like, "Yeah, but you're here to learn the math. The analogies are just easy stories to help you along. You're here to actually learn the math." And yeah, I mean, Primer's an excellent example because Primer was written by a guy who was a electrical engineer before he was a filmmaker and actually did this on the side, whereas it feels like Kevin Smith and Richard Kelly are comic book nerds. It's a different. There's
a reason why they're friends.
It's a different angle, right? And I mean, I guess I'm saying that there's room for both, but yeah, I given if I had to pick, of course I would take Primer over Southland Tales, but
I would pick Primer over most things.
Yeah, but totally. My argument is that just because I would take one over the other, I find that Southland Tales is not without its substantial charms.
Agreed.
I think that the low budget hard science fiction genre, or whatever you would want to call it, is very similar to the horror genre in that it's a brand of film that you can make, and although it might not appeal to the broad audience, there will always be the people who will love it with all of its flaws. And horror fans love the gore and the kills, and the science fiction fans love the
societal commentary,
whatever they can pull from it. I mean, the references and the whatever. Like there's all. I actually like this more than I like some of the recent, like Another Earth.
Ugh.
I would take this over Another Earth.
What about Darren Aronofsky's Pi, which definitely plays in the same territory as this?
I like Pi, but I mean, I just think it seems like there's like almost a lack of discernible taste, just like horror, where everyone loves anything with gore. With these low budget sci-fi films, they just seem to get a pass.
I like this movie precisely because it is in poor taste.
Okay,
that's a different. There's a fundamental difference. There's a fundamental difference of saying I just want to watch gore, and I like this movie because I find it to be, I don't know, like saucy or something about the way he's just relentlessly made a channel hopping movie.
Yeah.
I like that, and that's totally different from just saying, oh yeah, we're gonna drop this hammer into this guy's head and there's going to be brains. Like I don't understand why people like horror. I like horror movies, but I don't understand I like it just purely for gore. I think that this movie I like its bad taste, not because it's showing me gore, but because it's a movie about bad taste in bad taste. I like that. I that works for me.
I've always kind of wondered, what would it be like if John Waters directed Blade Runner?
Yeah, there you go.
So I don't know. That's kind of the angle I approach this movie with. Just keeping that.
John Waters.
Yeah. Just something kitschy and manic and ridiculous.
I don't quite see that connection, but I kind of get what you're going with that. Yeah. I mean, I completely hear where Jay is coming from. I feel that maybe the emphasis on the ideas, which are half-assed,
they are,
and is maybe the wrong way to approach the movie. But if if the comedy doesn't do it for you, and if just the mere form of channel surfing doesn't do it for you, like, you know, for me and Kurt and Jim, then there's just no way to approach the movie, because it's not, there's no meat. But I genuinely really love the style and the tone, which again I think captures something very specific in both its references and its approach to them that I've never seen in another movie. So I think it's kind of special.
UHF.
UHF. I mean, I was talking specifically again about sort of the college stoner ideas and the sort of I have read a Kurt Vonnegut book, and I have, you know, I looked up the Wikipedia entry on Marxism, and I'm like, yeah, and the fucking War on Terror is bullshit, and man, Patriot Act, fuck that, like that sort of.
This entire movie is taking place inside the head of Wiley Wiggins, inside of Dazed and Confused.
Exactly.
Totally.
Right.
Good call.
That's how he pitched it.
And again, I would be fine with that if it was half as long.
Yeah.
Okay. You know,
that's
I agree.
the main beef from me.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can appreciate certain elements of it. So
I think on that note, we will close up Southland Tales. More time spent on that movie than anyone wants.
I'm sure Richard Kelly is happy.
That is awesome, and it makes me happy.
We'll end up spending a year cutting 15 minutes from this podcast.
That's right. It will be released with the 3 graphic novel prequels to the show. They're available,
and I will provide a commentary for it
on one of the various online micro presses. So next Movie Club podcast will hopefully take place sometime in May, definitely before summer.
Good time.
And we're going to mix it up and look at a little bit. Well, I don't know what the theme is of this movie other than driving. We have John Frankenheimer's Elmore Leonard adaptation, 52 Pickup, which stars Roy Scheider and Anne Margaret, and Walter Hill's The Driver, which stars Ryan O'Neal and Bruce Dern. So hopefully we will all be back for that. Is there any final thoughts or anything before we close out the show? Jay, do you want to plug all of your websites and projects and all the usual thing at the end? I can plug filmjunk.com, thedocumentaryblog.com, and I guess stay tuned to twitter.com/timemachinedoc for upcoming news and announcements. And you should also say that Beauty Day is coming out on DVD very, very soon.
Right. It's actually, you can actually order it at on filmjunk.com right now for purchase, and it's officially coming out February 28th in Canada. But it's cheapest to buy it directly from Film Junk. 15 bones.
That's a great movie. Well worth it.
Yeah, definitely.
And
go visit
Jim.
Visit us at directorsclubpodcast.com, and my Twitter is Instant Jim. I think that might be it. I'm quite a fan of the Letterboxd, which a few of us are diving into as well. So hopefully once that gets publicized or goes public, everyone can join us over there too.
All right, and in addition to directorsclubpodcast.com, I've begun having a sort of a movie, just a log of keeping track of every movie I watch, and also sort of putting in the entries of all the movies I watched over the past year. That's over at Martha Marcy Nash and Young.wordpress.com.
Clever.
It is a little cult zone there. Of course, everyone listening to this podcast should bombard Patrick with Facebook friend requests
yes,
to
you
get
should.
in on the little campfire circle of commentary and Fifth Element quotes that happen there. My name is Kurt Halfyard, which I didn't introduce myself at the beginning of the show. I know you've waited all this time just to get my name. I can be found at row3.com and lending myself out to a inordinate number of guest spots on other podcasts, and also doing video content for thesubstream.com and writing for twitchfilm.net. Thank you for listening, everybody. This has been episode 24, and adieu.
Cheers.